Hey, welcome to tonight's training. So tonight we're going to be talking about a few different misconceptions, I guess, that I tend to hear, primarily the one on sugar and hormones, but I want to tackle a few other ones because as we talk about detoxing and I go into this topic, I'm going to be talking about diets, I guess, that I do, where when people tend to see me do certain diets, sometimes they get the idea that this is all that I do, and that's not the case. And so I want to make sure that there's no confusion. And I think that this topic around sugar is probably one of the topics that confuses people the most. Even though I tend to say things like, um, like I eat sugar, or like I still eat carbs, and then there's a reason why I do ketogenic diets, which basically is cutting out sugar and carbs. Sometimes people kind of like get that, like it's like a mixed message, like when do you do which, like how do I know when do I do that kind of thing. So I want to try to answer that as best as possible today, and start to uncover some of these topics and myths, basically to help you craft a diet and design a diet that fits your specific needs, because that's really what this is about. um, Everything that I do, okay, everything that I do when it comes to diet revolves around me growing probiotics in my gut. And the way that you go about doing that, it really depends on where you're at on your journey. Okay. When I was first starting out, okay, when I had yeast overgrowth, I had parasites and other things in my gut, there was a lot of things that I had to do that are different from what I can do today. Now that I've cleaned up my gut, now that I've removed some of those parasites, now that I've reduced the yeast overgrowth, um, there's things that I can do, such as like I can get away with eating more carbs. I can get away with eating more sugar, basically. And so I want to give you the same frame of like the thinking patterns, okay, because that's really what you're looking to get. Okay. It's kind of like, if I just give you an answer, then you're not going to know why you're doing what you're doing. But when you actually understand the principles, okay, like, and that's really what I'm trying to teach. I'm trying to teach you the principles, because when you understand the principles that lead me to the answer, what you get out of it is that you learn how to think for yourself, so that you know what's best for you. Because what's best for you may not be what I'm doing right now. Okay. It may be something that I did 5 years ago. Okay. And what I did 5 years ago, like I can probably still do it, and it's okay, but I'm like in a different point in my journey. Right. And so this is where people get confused, is because they're trying to really emulate what I do. And like I appreciate that. And that's something that you should be looking to do, is to emulate what I do. But keep in mind that where I'm at, okay, the level, I guess, where I'm at, it's advanced. Okay. And what I'm trying to do with these videos is to bridge that gap. Okay. I started down here, right? And so you're gonna have to do some of the same progressions that I took in order to get myself to this point where I'm able to do some of the more aggressive detoxes that I'm going to be sharing with you. And again, I say that because I want to share everything with you. And my concern with doing so is that if you don't know or understand the full process, and you try to do things that are too advanced for you, um, that's not going to be good for you. Like it's detoxing is not fun. Okay. Like I don't like to detox. Like whenever people hear me doing like a 5-day water fast, I don't exactly like or enjoy doing a 5-day water fast. Like when I'm going through it, it sucks. Like I'll be the first one to tell you that. But I enjoy doing it after the fact, right? Like after I go through a 5-day fast and I look back, even though like those 5 days like were not good, um, after the fact, like I feel so good, and like I enjoyed. But before I do the fast, like I don't even look forward to doing the fast. I just know like it's going to be a struggle, not even a struggle, but it's just who wants to go 5 days without eating? I like food. But anyways, like that's part of the process, right? And doing a 5 day water fast again, like that's super advanced. That's something that, if you're just starting out in your detox journey, like you shouldn't even be thinking about doing a 5 day water fast. You should be thinking about doing intermittent fasting and maybe doing juice fasting before you do water fasting. If you do juice fasting in intermittent fasting format, meaning that if you're doing like a 3 hour intermittent fast, 6 hour intermittent fast, if you can't do 6 hours, maybe you can do like a green juice in the morning, and you're still fasting, right? So you can still go like 6 hours without, like a solid meal. But if you have like green juice in the morning, like that will help you, right? And so you want to build up to stronger detoxes. And again, the only reason why fasting is something that you want to think about is because at the end of the day, okay, at the end of the day, what we're looking to accomplish here is we're looking to restructure our gut flora. And to restructure your gut flora, right, what we're looking to do is, on one hand, we're trying to grow probiotics and we're trying to get rid of bad bacteria. And the only way that I know of that that's even remotely possible to remove some of the bad bacteria so we can clean up and create an environment so that we can grow probiotics is through fasting. Like there's nothing else, like there's no magic pill that's going to clean you up, including like, I use oxy powder as a gut cleanser. Like that's a good gut cleanser, but even oxy powder isn't going to be as effective as if you fast. As a matter of fact, one of the ways that I can improve my own cleansing is if I do a fast and then do oxy powder while I'm fasting, because you just want to think about this. Okay, if I eat food, okay, there's going to be food in my gut. If I do oxy powder, which is supposed to clean my gut, what it's going to do, it's going to basically clean my gut. But if there's food in my gut, like that's stuff that it's just adding to the to the cleaning, essentially, right? It's like trying to dust a house when there's like a mess, like clothes all over the place, and there's stacks of paper on the shelves and things like that. Like it's harder to clean when there's mess like that. But if you fast, right, if you stop eating for a little bit to empty out your digestive tract, that's like removing like a stack of paperwork. It's removing the piles of clothes and basically getting to a place where like now you can see the surfaces. Now you can go deep clean and like dust out the places. Well, your gut, your digestive system is the same way. If your digestive tract is empty, the cleanses that you do while your digestive tract is empty are going to be that much more effective. And again, that's getting into the advanced version of what I do. That's like phase 3 stuff. Okay. And it's only, I'm bringing it up only to prepare you for, phase 3. But right now, really what we're focusing on is phase 2 stuff. So it's the mild stuff, it's the smaller, simpler, easier, more mild detoxes and cleanses that you have to do, just to get started. But it's always good to have that vision of, why you're doing what you're doing. And this is the reason why. So to kick it off, I want to talk about this, this misconception on sugar. Okay, because a lot of people have this idea that sugar is bad for them, and there's a variety of things that stem from thinking this way. So here's how I think of sugar, and why I'm not necessarily afraid of it, but instead how I think about sugar. Okay, really it's all food. To me, it's all food. Anything that you eat and drink, really, food and drink, anything that goes into the body is in one way or another going to grow some form of bacteria in your gut. Your gut flora, both good bacteria and bad bacteria, is really nothing more than the sum total of all the food that you've eaten all your life. Like that's basically what lives in your gut right now is just a sum of all the food and drinks that you've had. Okay, so when you look at your health, that's all that it is. It's a reflection of what your eating and drinking habits have been. So when you talk about sugar, okay, people will say like, oh, sugar is bad, and there's other people that are going to say, well, no, you need sugar for hormone production. Okay, if you have no energy, okay, if you're not producing hormones, you're going to need sugar at some point. Okay, like that's one thing that you need to understand. Is like there's going to come a point where sugar is actually going to help you produce hormones. So the goal here isn't necessarily to cut out sugar or think of sugar in terms of is it good or is it bad, but instead start thinking about what happens to food once it enters your body, because sugar is neither good or bad. Okay, sugar gives you energy. Sugar feeds bacteria. Okay, sugar is essentially food, and that food is food for bacteria. And this concept alone, I mean, this is really where things are unique, I guess, when it comes to my diet, is that when I eat food, I mean, sure, like I'm human, so obviously when I eat food, there's a part of me that's like, hey, there's food that feeds me because of the taste, and it's like what I want to eat, and that's, there's that side. But there's another side of me that, on a higher level, I kind of zoom out and say, when I eat food, I'm not really feeding my body. What I'm feeding is the bacteria that lives in my gut. And so if that bacteria that lives in your gut includes things like yeast overgrowth, and that will be one. That's just an umbrella word for all the wild yeast strains that are not good for you. So things like yeast candida, yeast albicans, and there's who knows how many variations, but they're wild yeast and they're not good. Okay, so it's not that sugar is bad for you, it's that sugar is feeding what's in your gut. So if you have bad bacteria in your gut, then it holds true that sugar is bad for you, but not because sugar is bad for you, it's because you're feeding the bad bacteria in your gut. So it doesn't help you. Okay, it's not doing you any good to be eating sugar. And cutting out sugar is a temporary relief. It's something that you want to do to start out, just to alleviate and to basically work on cleaning your gut. But your goal isn't to cut out sugar. Okay, your goal is to clean your gut so that you can reintroduce these foods. And so oftentimes what happens to people is that they they learn that one thing. Okay, they learn this one thing, and all of a sudden they just want to be keto forever. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if you're having issues with energy, um, there's a way to use sugar where you can be keto the majority of your time and use sugar as a way to supercharge and basically refuel your body. Because for example, like one way that I use sugar is as a pre-workout, right? And with sugar, this is where you have to start looking at the process like from the top down. Okay, there's different types of sugar. Okay, what makes sugar good or bad? Always go back to these principles: water, minerals, pH, temperature. So if you're eating sugar from fruit, okay, good fruit, what makes fruit good is if it's full of water, if it's full of minerals, if the tree had, the soil where the tree was grown had the proper pH and the proper temperature, that's what's going to make it good. Not to mention that, when we're talking about fruit, um, the seed, okay, the seed needs to be fertile, okay? So if that's the type of sugar that you're eating, we're going to call this fertile fruit, meaning that you can take the seed from the fruit and plant it and regrow, okay, that's good sugar. Anything else, any other type of sugar, when you start to refine, like, um, you know, any kind of like refined sugar or any other kind of like carbohydrates, um, they're just not going to be as good. And that's not exactly a full accurate statement. So let me rephrase that, because you can get sugar out of grains. Okay, grains it's another big topic, right? A lot of people are like, oh, grains are bad for you. Not really, because grains that are good for you are, again, grains that are both fertile, okay, fertile, and in this case, I'm going to also throw in the word heirloom, meaning that they haven't been modified, they haven't been hybridized, spliced. Like corn, wheat, for example, is the original wheat. It's very different than your emmer wheat or your winter wheat and some of these other modern day variations of grains. So you need to have like the good, grain that's hasn't been modified, but it's also fertile, and it needs to be grown in places where it has good water, minerals, pH, and temperature. That's going to make for good, for good sugar. Another source of good sugar would be honey. Okay, but again, it needs to be raw, it needs to be unpasteurized, and it needs to, come from a place where all of these, um, you know, water and minerals are in place, right? Because with honey and grains and oh, I guess with grains, it depends if you cook it or not, but like with honey and sugar, these are living foods. Okay, living foods. It's because water, minerals, pH, temperature, and the pH, basically, that's what creates an environment for bacteria to grow and live. And in fruit, okay, the seed, that's what's in it. There's bacteria in there that's fertile. Okay, that's basically what you're getting out of it. Honey has enzymes, it has all the live bacteria, and so that food, that's good stuff, because in a way, when you're eating that sugar, you're in a way taking probiotics. Okay, so now the issue really, and the things that you want to look after, is it's not so much whether the food is good or not for you, because all food, like if it's good food, meaning like if it's heirloom and it meets this criteria, it's good for you. Okay, that's one level. The next level is preparation. Okay, and preparation is really where things begin to change. Preparation is really where you begin to adapt food to your current state, your health state. Okay, so if, for example, you have yeast overgrowth, well, eating sugar, even if it's from good food, isn't going to help you. Okay, and in that case, there's a couple things that you can do. Going keto is one thing, but the other thing that you can do is to start to introduce fermented foods into your diet, right? So this is why I share the my pineapple coconut probiotics, right? So pineapple is sugar, right? There's sweetness, I guess, in it, but if you ferment it, okay, probiotics will eat the sugar. So when you're drinking it, there's no more sugar. Now all of the sugars and all of the nutrients in the pineapple have been converted into the actual nutrients, and now you're getting the enzymes and the vitamins and everything that would be in the pineapple and coconut. And so when you're drinking that, Okay, there's no more sugar, but now you're getting the nutrients, and that's one way to bypass, the yeast overgrowth, because when that hits your gut, there's nothing for them to eat because it's already been digested, and now your body's just able to uptake it, right? And so that's one way to basically, for you to feed your body without feeding the bad bacteria. And if you do that long enough, what happens is that your yeast overgrowth, like that population, is going to decrease and decrease. And you can now start to reintroduce unfermented foods into your diet, raw fruits, raw honey. And this is where you need to start to pay attention to your body. Like, where are you at, right? So because if you've done some, some of these, whether you've done either keto or introduced like fermented foods into your diet, and you kind of feel like, hey, you know what, I think my yeast overgrowth has reduced. Now you can basically start experimenting, because this is really what you're going to be doing. Is it's an experiment. Is you don't know, like, I mean, you're going to feel, right, you're going to feel better, and that's about like the only sign that you're going to have. And the only other way to test it is like, okay, let's say it's been 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you've cut out sugar and you feel better, but now you may be getting to the point where your energy levels are dipping because you haven't been eating sugar. You've been cutting out carbs, and your glycogen levels may be depleting. Like you may need to like rebalance. Well, there's nothing wrong with eating some fruit and seeing like, okay, like if you eat fruit, do you have a do you have a flare up? Like, does the yeast like all of a sudden like spring up again and repopulate, and you get to experience, all the issues that come with yeast overgrowth, which tend to be things like constipation, gas, maybe like dry skin. Those are issues that will come up. And so what you're going to see, and this is how I went through it. It was like I cut out like sugars. I did a little bit of keto and or juicing and fasting, and it got to a point where like, okay, like my body's just breaking down so much that I need to refeed, I need to refuel. And I will eat, a little bit of sugar, and like I will get to a point where like my energy levels will hit like a new high, because like my body's cleaner. So like now the sugar is actually going into my body and my body's using it up. But then I will get to a point where like some of those yeast overgrowth symptoms start to come back. Okay. And that's going to happen. But that's the dance that you're doing essentially. It's like, okay, you'll eat an apple. It's like, hey, you know what? I feel more energy and I don't see any issues with yeast. So maybe like the next day you try 2 apples and you feel more energy and you're doing good. Maybe you try like a third piece of fruit, and then when you start to introduce like 3 pieces of fruit, you realize that, you know what, I think my yeast is coming back. Now you know that you're doing too much sugar, but now you have a tool, because now you know that if you cut out sugar, you can reduce the yeast population, and you have some energy, right? You've kind of refueled, and you're able to go back into like this whole fasting and cutting out sugar. But you're doing it temporarily to reduce the yeast, your yeast overgrowth and clean up, and then you go back into reintroducing it. Like that's really how this works. It's you cut it out and you reintroduce, and you just kind of like work your way out, knowing that behind all of this, you're doing the foundational work, right? Because if you're hydrating, right, if your body is hydrated, if your gut's hydrated, if you have good levels of vitamin D and you are nourishing, okay, over time, it's helping you optimize everything here, right? Water, minerals, right? Your vitamin D is going to help you with your pH and your temperature. Nourishing, right? That part of nourishing is minerals. Part of nourishing is, your pH, because minerals, it's electricity. pH is potential hydrogen, which is another way of measuring voltage, right? So it's basically you're dealing with like electricity here. You don't need to understand it, but just know that when you nourish, you're giving your body nutrients where it's just like flipping a switch. That's what you're doing. You're powering up your system. And this together is what's helping you produce hormones, right? And now there's obviously going to be other food components to it, but just know that doing this, it's already helping you with that. And so now you're taking this as the foundation. Okay, so this is why this is phase one. It's just nourishing your body. You're feeding. You're making sure that your body has energy. That when you detox, okay, detoxing is your body's breaking down. Okay, your body's breaking down, and again, it's not fun because when your body's breaking down, you're not only feeling that weakness from your muscle breaking down, but also when you're detoxing, your body's pushing out toxins out of your body, and you're exposing your body to toxins, which if it's overdone, you can get headaches, you can get nausea, you can get things like that. And it's not necessarily bad, but you need to learn how to modulate that. You need to learn how to turn the dial down basically, and have that ability to, when it comes to detoxing, it's just because an herb is good for you, right, doesn't mean that, hey, if one capsule is good for you, 10 is going to be good for you, right? Like that's not how you want to go about detoxing. When it comes to like hydration, vitamin D, and nourishing, those are things that you can virtually do in unlimited amounts, right? You're going to get tired of drinking water before you overdo it. Right? You can overdo hydration, obviously, but I mean, like you have to like really drink a lot. Vitamin D, same thing. Like it's, if you're doing fermented cod liver oil, it's really hard to like overdo it. You're going to get tired of doing it before you get to a point where you're overdoing it. But that's phase one. Like phase one, like don't be afraid to like nourish your body, hydrate your body, boost your vitamin D levels. Phase two, when you're cleaning, this is where you would want to learn to ease on the throttle. Okay, you don't want to go full throttle to begin with. You want to start out a little bit at a time, right? Give just a little bit, ease into it, and work. You're just chiseling away a little bit at a time. That's basically what you're doing. And so that's why I want you to have like this frame of reference so that you can understand how I think about sugar and how it plays a role in my diet. Like when do I introduce it? When do I cut it out and all that kind of stuff. So let's go through a full cycle, right? Because we got phase one, we are nourishing. Okay, and with nourishing, what you're going to see with my diet is that there's hydration, vitamin D, and then got either beef organs or blue green algae. And this diet, like to me, nourishing, like the base, the foundation of my diet is kind of described in some ways as primal fat burner. So you can think of this as the ketogenic side of my diet. Okay, and I can do keto in both animal-based foods, plant-based foods, right? It depends, right? If I'm trying to build muscle versus trying to clean up more, right? This is one way that I can change how aggressive I am with my detoxes, right? If I want to just clean, like to maintain, I can keep eating animal-based foods, and I'm getting a lot more energy, but it's harder to clean, right? But I also get a lot more energy. Okay, so it's like it makes it so it feels more mild. Whereas if I want to like really detox and clean, I can just go all plant-based, and it's going to clean me out way better, but I'm also going to be weaker. I'm also going to not have as much energy, and I also have to be careful not to overdo it because I'm just being more aggressive. But this is where it starts. In phase two, right, there's the the whole cleansing protocol, I'm going to put this into two categories, going from basically mild and then a spectrum of aggressive. Okay. And when I think of mild, I'm thinking, okay, like all the things that I do, okay, liver cleanse, colon cleanse, okay, a kidney cleanse, lymph system cleanse. So whatever I'm doing, right? If I'm taking Ayurvedic herbs, if I'm doing oxy powder, if I'm, doing some other, other herb or whatever to clean up, um, there's already, I guess, a spectrum there where like some of the herbs that I use are mild, some of the other ones are a little bit more aggressive. But then what makes this even more aggressive is if I start to introduce fasting to the equation, meaning that, okay, it's one thing for me to do Ayurvedic herbs with a meal, right? And that's how you want to start out, right? If you're taking, things like Bacopa monnieri, milk thistle seed, turmeric, and, some of the other liver cleanse herbs that I use, you want to start out with a meal, and that's going to be a mild cleanse. But if you want to progress, if you want to advance, if you want to go faster, right? If you want to clean up faster, or if you just want, like me, like you just want to like see like how clean can I get, the most effective way to clean is going to be if you fast and then start to do those herbs. But again, you can't do that starting out, because if you have a lot of toxicity, okay, just doing the herbs with a meal is it's more than enough. You're going to be pushing stuff out, and food is going to help to dilute and help you give you some nutrients so that your body isn't, detoxing too fast, too soon, too fast kind of thing. um that's a progression that you want to essentially keep in mind. And then with phase 3, what you're going to see, it's essentially you're going to take everything that you do in phase 1, but now you're going to optimize. And the way that you're going to optimize is you're going to boost. Okay. And your boosting is going to come from um, introducing foods like cholesterol, okay, sugar, okay, and with keeping in mind, okay, that cholesterol is best digested when you're on a more ketogenic diet, and sugar, um, being almost like a primer. Okay, so you don't want to do them at the same time, but you can use them in a combination where you can time it. For example, I can be fasting, and then I can eat, a fruit, say like midday around noon, and then I do my workout, right? And then if I do my workout, right, and that's like the reason why I eat sugar primarily. Like if I eat a piece of fruit or something like that, it's to give me like that explosive energy. But it's also giving my body nutrients that I wouldn't get if I didn't eat it. And then later in the evening, okay, I've already used up all that sugar. My body's like empty again, and my body's ketogenic adapted for the most part, to where like if I eat fat, my body's going to have no problem digesting that fat. And then I can introduce cholesterol in the form of like dairy, whether it's like raw milk or egg yolks and things like that, to produce hormones, right? But these are things that I would do during phase 3, and these are bursts, I guess, of energy. Like these aren't things that I do every single day. You don't want to do them too often. You just want to do them as needed. Okay. And you're doing these with other herbs to basically balance hormones. Okay, because this is really where you're putting your body to the test. You're really trying to see like, how good can your body like really feel, and what are you missing? Like what does your body need to really function, and basically give your body like that boost that you definitely need. And when you go through this cycle, okay, you go through phase 1, phase 2, you clean up, phase 3, this is going to work, okay, if you have probiotics. So probiotics is something that you're going to start to introduce into your diet in between phase 2 and phase 3, because when you do phase 1 and phase 2, what you're essentially doing is you're creating an environment for probiotics to grow. And once you have fresh probiotics in your body, now you can actually put them to work. Now you can actually say like, okay, make me some hormones, like go clean up my body, go like build muscle, like do the things that you're meant to do essentially. And you've given them everything, and now you're giving them that boost, right? And so you wouldn't want to do all of these, boosts essentially without really trying to grow probiotics. Like that's part of growing probiotics. It's like you're now like feeding, that's what you're feeding, right? This is why, to me, I no longer think about I'm feeding my body, but instead, like I'm thinking about I'm feeding the probiotics that live in my gut, and this is how I think about it, right? So with this in mind, like I want to start tackling some of these misconceptions and myths and things that I hear people say when it comes to a diet and what people believe is good or not good. Right. So we started out with sugar. Right? A lot of people think like, oh, sugar isn't good for you. You got to cut it out. And right. So, I think we covered that pretty well, where like it's not that sugar is good or bad. It's really what lives in your gut that determines whether you should be doing it or not doing it. But your goal should always be to get to a point where you can reintroduce it, right? So you're working towards it. And so don't be afraid to eat sugar. Use it as a tool. Use it as a tool, as long as you worry more about making sure that you're eating the good kind, like good fruit, that your fruit is coming from like a good place. If you're eating honey, that that the honey is like good quality. Honey, worry more about that than whether or not you should be eating it. But do keep in mind that if you have yeast overgrowth, cutting it out temporarily initially is good, but work towards reintroducing it, right? So that's the one on sugar. Fiber is the same. Okay, fiber is another big one that I hear all the time. Like, hey, a lot of people think that fiber is good for you, and again, it goes back to, it's the same. Like to me, it's neither good or bad. Okay, fiber, it's also going to feed probiotics. If you have a lot of like bad bacteria in your gut, right? That's why like people that have like constipation sometimes, usually what they have is like yeast overgrowth, and then they're given fiber, and what happens is that fiber feeds that yeast overgrowth, and they get even more constipated because they're feeding that yeast, right? And so that's not the right time to introduce fiber. Fiber is good to actually clean out your gut, but that doesn't happen if you have bad bacteria in your gut. If you have like good bacteria in your gut only and you eat fiber, then yeah, like it's going to actually help you clean out your gut. It's going to scrub it. But if you have bad bacteria, if you have yeast overgrowth and you eat fiber, it's not going to act as a broom to clean out your gut. It's just going to feed the yeast overgrowth, and it's probably going to make the constipation, even worse, right? So again, it goes back to what's living in your gut. Another big one is plant-based foods. So there seems to be a huge push, okay, a huge push for going plant-based and doing this whole vegan diet and whatnot. And again, like if you've seen any of my past videos, and I talk a lot about it, where like I went raw vegan, and I think that doing a raw vegan diet is actually an amazing way to detox your body and really cleanse out. But what I think happens though is that a lot of people start watching documentaries, or I don't know what they read online, where all of a sudden they're learning and hearing from the vegan community, and they start to get all these ideas and beliefs about being vegan that go beyond like the actual benefits of going plant-based. And they start to hear things um like red meat causes cancer. I think that's like the biggest one. But then there's also like the whole like the ethics, where vegans, apparently, like if you do vegan, like that's good for the environment. Um, and again, like this is where you want to be careful about what you read about and what you believe, because it's not that red meat causes cancer. This is one of those topics, kind of like salt. Okay, salt is another topic. A lot of people think that salt is bad for them. Okay, and what makes salt good or bad is minerals. Okay, if you have salt without minerals, like table salt that's been stripped of all the minerals, okay, so if you have no minerals, that's bad. But if you're taking salt that has minerals, that's good, right? That's why solely salt, the pink Himalayan large solely salt crystals that we use, I don't use it because, I mean, I do like salt, but it's not like, oh, I'm not thinking about it in terms of like I'm eating salt. No, I'm thinking in terms of like I'm getting minerals from the solely salt. Ionic magnesium, same thing. It's a salt coming from Salt Lake, right? The big Great Salt Lake in Utah. That's what it has. It's ionic magnesium and trace minerals, right? You're looking for the minerals. When it comes to red meat, okay, you're going to have both good and bad. Okay, good is going to come from regenerative farming. Okay, and bad is going to be conventional. Okay, and the best way to understand it is it's simple. Okay, regenerative farming, some people are calling this biodynamic farming, and I'm only going to say this because the food industry is known to take some of these words like organic and whatever words we tend to use to describe what's good, and they change the definition of some of these words. And that's what confuses you really, is when the food industry starts to use these in labels and they start to change the definition. But really what you're looking for, so if at some point this word gets taken and gets redefined, really what it means is that the cattle is grown in pastures where there's practices being done to where there's care for the land. Basically, like the farmers, what they're doing is they're putting into the land more than they're taking out. They're growing vegetation. They're not just growing grass. So like the cattle isn't just going and eating all the grass. No, like they actually make sure that the cattle doesn't eat all the grass, right? Like it's good for cattle to eat young grass, but it's not good for the land to have young grass being eaten. And so farmers have to be aware and conscious of making sure that their cattle isn't just eating all the young grass and not letting it grow, because that's going to deplete the soil from minerals. And this is where we go back into, does the food that you're eating have minerals? Okay, so there's a balance that needs to happen here where the farmer needs to be conscious that, hey, the cow's going to get more minerals if it eats young grass, but we also have to make sure that the land keeps its minerals. So they rotate crops, but not only are they rotating, they're also growing other vegetation. They're not doing single crops. They're like monocrops. They're growing other things. They're growing other trees. They're making sure that it's not just cows grazing, but hey, can we add chickens to it? Can we grow other vegetation? Can we attract more fauna? Basically, it's the same concept that you want to have in your gut. And we call this diversity. And diversity is basically growing as many different strains of good probiotics in your gut. Regenerative farming does that on a macro level on the land. So they're not just growing cattle, they're growing grass, they're growing trees, they're growing fruit trees, they're growing flowers, or attracting bees and and maybe like worms and whatever, birds. Like there's a bunch of things that are basically trying to be grown. It's creating diversity and it's growing vegetation. It's actually adding to the land. It's basically giving life to the land. Conventional, if you go to a conventional farm, they don't do any of those practices and they don't feed cattle grass. And sometimes This is where, you know, some companies may feed the cattle grass just so they can call it grass fed, right? And that's why you have to be careful. Like if you're buying grass fed beef, just because it says that it's grass fed, just like organic, it doesn't mean that it's good, right? It needs to be grass fed, grass finished. But again, just because it says on the label that it's grass fed, grass finished, it doesn't mean that the farmers followed these practices. So you have to like really connect with your food and know where it comes from, how it's grown, because that's what's determining what's going into your gut. Because here's what happens is that you'll have farmers that, okay, they feed the cattle grass and they can call it grass fed, but they also feed the cattle grains, and the grains, they don't come from regenerative farms. They come from the whole GMO and whatever other bad grains that you're trying to avoid yourself. Mass produced grains, corn, wheat, soy are like the biggest ones. They will feed the cattle that. And what happens is the cattle has the same gut issues that you're trying to solve. And now you're eating those products. That's the reason why this statement is true, is because of conventional products. Conventional products make this statement true. But if you're eating regenerative farming type of products, these are some of the most healing foods that you can get, both plant-based and animal-based. And so this is where if you're under the impression, because you know what happens sometimes is that people will start going vegan, and when you go vegan, your body starts to detox and you start to feel good. And what happens, what people experience sometimes is like they stop eating meat and all of a sudden they feel good, and they basically start to equate and correlate, you know, they start to believe it's like, hey, ever since I started eating more plant-based, I feel better, I'm never eating meat again. What they don't realize is that the reason why they feel better is because they cut out conventional meat products. But now they're missing out on regenerative farming type of products. And the way that I think of food is animal-based foods, okay, to me, are really good for, I'm going to call this your physical body, and especially for hormone production. Okay, this is one of the biggest struggles with people that, again, I have nothing, like I have nothing against going vegan. Like I've gone raw vegan myself. I think it's an amazing diet to detox. But if you have hormone issues, it's very hard. It's very hard to get your hormone production up if you stay on a plant-based diet. Okay, and what I would, well, like what I did personally, okay, and you can look at my videos. When I did like my whole raw vegan, I like to switch where I do raw vegan to detox. I clean out my body, but then I have no problem introducing animal-based foods, dairy products, get some hormone production going, because that gives me so much energy. It rebuilds my body. And then after I rebuild my body, again, this is where you have the opposite end of the spectrum, you know, the carnivore community. Okay, this is another misconception of, or myth, I guess, that I hear, you know, that plants are toxic and that they have oxalates and, you know, whatever else they want to think about. To me, like, again, that statement doesn't hold true. Okay, to me, it's like, okay, if you're eating plants, just because you're vegan, it doesn't mean that you're eating healthy, because you can be eating conventional products and those are just as bad as eating conventional meat, right? If you're eating fruits and vegetables that were sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, like all that stuff is going into your body. If the fruits and vegetables that you're eating, if they're not fertile, right? If you're eating, right, there's like organic, you know, seedless fruits, right? Like to me, that's an oxymoron. Like there's no such thing as a good seedless fruit. Like nothing seedless is good for you. It's infertile. It's not good for you. You want fertile fruit. And you can be in just a bad diet if you're vegan. When it comes to oxalates, That's what fermentation does for you, right? That's why when it comes to like plant-based, you need to learn how to soak, sprout, and ferment. When do you use each and all that stuff? Like that's a different topic that we'll cover later. But this is why like fermentation, these are your medicinal foods. Okay, herbal nutrimedicinal foods, that's basically like where they're at. And that's why to me, plant-based is a good way to, feed the mind, like your spirit. That's why when you ferment, you make hard liquor. That's why they call them spirits. It's because it basically helps your body take your hormone production, which is energy, and it helps you raise that vibration, that energy to your third eye. Like that's what we're trying to learn here. Like that's basically what I am trying to discover within my own body, and how to use diet to make my body feel that energy, that vibration. And that's basically how I deal with diet, like how I think about diet. And again, I wouldn't be able to get to some of the energy levels that I reach. Okay, when I go on a plant-based diet myself, because I like to do that to not only detox, but also if I'm looking to like meditate and calm my mood, and get rid of any kind of like anxiety and ground myself, plant-based diets are amazing for that. If I don't do a hormone boost by using an animal-based diet, by producing hormones, okay, using dairy because it has cholesterol, and because all of your sex hormones are directly derived from cholesterol, your testosterone, pregnenolone, estrogen, all of these, steroid type of hormones, they come directly from cholesterol. If I don't do that, then I don't have any raw material, any raw energy that my body can basically use to vibrate and to basically, I have no energy to raise. But if I have a ton of energy, right? Again, you're looking to become fertile yourself. That's why eating fertile fruits is what makes sense, right? And this is what makes you fertile. But when you make yourself fertile, I mean, that energy, you can transmutate that energy in a physical way, right? If you have a partner and you're looking to procreate, that's one way to use it. The other way to use it is creatively, which means instead of physically pushing out that energy, what you're doing is you're keeping that energy to yourself and you're using it creatively. And that's where plant-based foods really help you. But if you have all of that pent-up energy, right, that's the only way that you can reach these levels of creativity. And that's why you have to learn to use both plant-based and animal-based foods and alternate. And again, how much of each do you use? That's what you're going to learn, right? If you're not producing enough hormones, you might want to focus a little bit more on animal-based foods. But if you're all of a sudden producing a lot of hormones, plant-based foods help you balance those hormones. That's where fasting comes into play, and juicing and doing herbs and other things, like fermented foods and beverages. They're going to help you balance out those hormones. And you're going to see that you're going to all of a sudden use all of that energy, right? So you cannot be afraid of plant-based foods, right? So if you're a carnivore, like start learning about soaking, sprouting, and fermentation, and learn how to introduce plant-based foods into your diet. If you're vegan, again, there's nothing wrong with going vegan. And I think that if you're healthy, if you have good hormone production, you can go vegan for a long time, before your body like starts to like break down, which is, kind of like what you're doing with the plant-based diet is you're constantly breaking down. That's why it kind of feels good, because you're just detoxing. But if you look at a lot of people have been doing it for years, that's the reason why they're weaker, they're just, for the most part malnourished. And to me, like when I go vegan, like I feel so good that I want to stay there because I do feel good. But I know that if I don't boost my hormones, a lot of issues can arise. And so I will go vegan, but I'm not afraid to boost my hormones. And I like boosting my hormones too, because it does build my physical body. I feel stronger, but I also know that I can't just be building. I gotta allow my body to break down, recreate myself, and do this. And again, can't be afraid of any of that. Can't be afraid of sugar. Can't be afraid of salt. Can't be afraid of fiber. Kind of touch on cholesterol a little bit. You cannot be afraid of cholesterol. You got to learn how your body uses it. Um, from my point of view, what I've seen is that the people that have high cholesterol are people who don't eat enough, and or in combination with having insulin resistance, which usually happens from bad fats, polyunsaturated fats, vegetable oils. Those are some of the reasons why I see people getting high cholesterol. Basically, people that damage their liver and gallbladder, right? Usually through either high consumption of sugar and or vegetable oils, or more than likely both, plus dehydration and all the other things that we've talked about. That's what I've seen. Is kind of like the common pattern of people are dealing with this. But again, that doesn't mean that cholesterol is bad for you. It all goes back to like what's going on in your gut, your liver, your entire microbiome. If you clean up, if you learn to digest, you're going to see that all of these foods, okay, you're looking to incorporate these foods. Okay, don't ever, like, I don't like to think of like any of these are bad for you. I like to think of what do I need to do to my body to introduce these foods back into my body, because you need these foods in your body. Like that's how I think. That's how I think about my diet. That's what I think will make your diet good, because again, without cholesterol, how do you plan on making hormones? All hormones are derived from cholesterol. So if you don't eat cholesterol, that's the question that I ask, like, how are you planning on making hormones, right? Without salt, how are you planning on getting minerals? Can you get it from just eating like good fruits and vegetables? Maybe, but I think that we're at a point where most of our fruits are just not well mineralized. That, I mean, if you had like good levels of minerals and hydration, that would be one thing, but chances are that most people just don't. um, right? So you can't be afraid of salt, can't be afraid of sugar, can't be afraid of fiber, can't be afraid of red meats, can't be afraid of plants. Just got to learn how to introduce those into your body, how they work in your body, and that's part of what you're going to be learning. In addition to just doing your routines, um, learn how to nourish your body, keep up with hydration, boosting your vitamin D, detox, and then this has to do more with like how do you prepare foods, how do you cycle foods in and out of your diet, right? These are things that over time you start to like learn little things here and there, and then you start to create your own routine, because this really depends on what you want to do. Okay, if you want to spend more time meditating, go more plant-based. If you want to build muscle, if you want to if you want to do more physical activity, go more animal-based. Mix and match, right? Maybe you find that you do some animal-based and you can do vegan for a long time and still be able to keep up with physical activity, right? Push your limits. Like, this is for you to experiment and find out what can your body do, right? There's no right or wrong, right? These are the principles, and these principles hopefully give you the answers that you're looking for. So that's my goal. I hope that you got a ton of value from today, that this helps you improve your diet. I look forward to seeing more of your progress, seeing your diets, and seeing what you're doing with this. That's all that I got for today. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next time. Talk soon.